Harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are angels. Just as weeds are collected and burnt up with fire, so will it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will collect out of his kingdom all who cause others to sin and all evildoers. They will throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be wailing and grinding of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Whoever has ears ought to hear. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Lord Jesus Christ.
Good evening.
Good evening, Father.
My dear brothers and sisters, today we resume our reading of the Gospel of St. Matthew. We are still in chapter 13. And of course, as obviously you have heard, our Gospel tonight is the explanation of the parable about the sower, whom there is an enemy who also sowed weeds among the wheat. Of course, if you remember, that was our Gospel last Saturday. It was the parable, a story of there was somebody who sowed good seed, and after he had sowed seeds, what happened? There was an enemy who came who also sowed weeds among the wheat. And of course, they only discovered when it was almost harvest time, because as I was telling you last Saturday, remember that kind of weed in Palestine, they call it darnel or tares, that they look like the same exactly as the wheat. And you can only determine or distinguish between the two if it is a darnel, a tare, or a wheat when it is the grains are already ripe. And of course, our Gospel of Saturday, the parable of that parable speaks of our patience regarding the evil one. That of course, the evil will continuously exist among all of us. And by the way, how do we see that in that particular parable? Remember when the slaves discovered that there were weeds among the wheat. It was almost, the grains are already ripe. When they went to the master and said, "Do you want us to pull the weeds so that we can only have the wheat?" And what was the response of the master? "No, let them stay, because if you pull the weeds, what happened? Of course, the wheat go with them. Therefore, you really have to wait for harvest time." That's why, as I said, the emphasis on the actual parable is really on the patience on the evil one. That we really have, there will always be struggle in our life until the end of our life, until the end of times. Don't ever think that in our life there will be a moment when there is no problem. It will never happen. The evil one will always be there. But in the explanation in our gospel tonight, you might be asking, why would Jesus explain the parable? Well, it is very obvious in our gospel tonight. Matthew tells us Jesus dismissed the crowds and went into the house. The parables, if you will notice in the Gospels, would always be addressed to the public, would always be addressed to the crowds. But it will be the privacy of Jesus with his disciples that he will explain the parable. And I think the parable, the explanation is very simple and of course easy to understand. Who's the one who sowed good seed? Of course, Jesus, the Son of Man. Who is the one who sowed, of course, the weeds? Of course, the evil one. And of course, the emphasis of Jesus in the explanation of the gospel is harvest time. Did you notice that? In the parable itself, the emphasis is patience with the evil. It will always be there. When it comes to the explanation, Jesus emphasizes more the harvest time. That yes, good and evil